Welcome to my YouTube channel where I simplify the web. In this video, I'll be simplifying CSS combinators. In a previous video I made, I showed you selector types for CSS for targeting elements that you want to style, and I showed you 11 of them, of which 4 of them were actually CSS combinators. If you want to watch that video, I'm going to leave a link down in the video description for you to check it out. In this video, I'll be focusing only on combinators, and for the 4 combinators I shared in that video, I'll be going in more detail with them in this video as I share even more examples. So what are combinators in CSS? Combinators in CSS allows you to combine multiple selectors so that you can specifically select elements depending on the relationship between the elements that match these selectors. If this feels big for you to understand, don't worry, let's jump straight to my code example as I show you how different combinators work. This is the code example I'll be using to explain how these different combinators work, and this is the result here. So we have this H2 here, and then we have the section, and inside this section we have another H2, and in this section we also have this div. This div has H2, it has P, and then inside this same section we have 2 other P's. I am one paragraph, I am another paragraph. You can see the results here. So let's start from the first combinator, the Descendant Combinator. This combinator allows you to style an element which is a descendant of another element, and descendant here can mean child, grandchild, great-grandchild, great-great-great-grandchild. So let me show you how it works here. Now for the Descendant Combinator, here in the styles, you're going to have your first selector, and then you have a space, and after that empty space you have another selector. What this means is that the element that is selected with this selector is a descendant of the element that is selected with this other selector, and then here you can have your styles. Now you can use any type of selector that you want, which I showed in my previous video on selector types, but for this video I'm just going to stick to using tag names as selectors. So let's say I want to style H2. I come here and then I say H2, and then in this H2 I say color red. If I come here and I refresh, you can see that all the H2s are red. But what if I only want to style the H2 that is a descendant of this section? Then I'm going to have the selector here, which is the section tag name selector, and then I have H2, which means we're going to select the H2s that are descendants of this section. If I come here and I refresh, you can see that the first one is not affected, and that's because here in the HTML, the H2 is not a descendant of this section. But these other H2s that are descendants, you can see this one is a direct child, this one is a grandchild, because this one has its own direct parent, which is this div. But since both of them are descendants, you can see both of them have the color red. I can also go further and do something like this: section space div space H2. We're going to select the H2 that is a descendant of a div, and then that div is also a descendant of the section, which means we're targeting section div this H2. If I come here and I refresh, you can see that only the third H2 has the color red, because that is what meets these descendant combinator selectors that we have here. Like I said, you can use other types of selectors. So here I can actually have the section class, which I have here. This is a class section. So by using the period and the section, it's still going to be H2 being a descendant of a div, and then div being a descendant of a section class element. If I come here and I refresh, you can see it has the same effect. The second combinator is a child combinator. This allows you to select an element that is a direct child of another element. With the descendant combinator, this H2 is a descendant of section, this other H2 is a descendant of section. But what if you want only direct children? Then you use the greater than symbol. So here I'm going to have section like this and H2. I'm going to change this back to a tag name. So we have section, then we have this greater than symbol, and then we have this H2. And what this means is that this H2 should be a direct child, not a grandchild or a great-grandchild or any form of descendant, but it should be a direct child of the section, which means we are targeting this H2 that is a direct child of this section. So if I come here and I refresh, you can see that this second H2 is colored red because that is the direct child of this section as we have specified here. And I can also go further to do something like this, which means H2 that is a direct child of a div that is a direct child of the section, which means I'm targeting section, direct child, div, direct child, H2. Come here and I refresh, you can see that the third H2 is now colored red. As I mentioned earlier, you can use different selectors for this, so I can actually use the pseudo-class selector by adding a hover pseudo-class here, which means when this section is in the hover state, then we're going to select the direct direct div child, and then we're going to select the direct h2 child of that div. So if I come here and I refresh, you can see that the third h2 is not colored yet, but when I hover over the section, you can see that that style is now applied. So you can use different selectors when you are using combinators. The third combinator is the sibling combinator, and this allows you to style an element that is a sibling after another element. What do I mean here? Let's go back to this HTML. Now this h2 and this div and these p tags here, they are all siblings, just like you have in families. So if I come here by using the tilde symbol, tilde, I can do something like this: h2 tilde and p, and then here I can style some things like color purple. Let me use purple for example. What this means is that it's going to select all the p tags that are siblings of this h2 tag, which means we have this h2 and then it's going to select this p tag because they are siblings, and also this h2 here is going to select this p tag because it's a sibling of it. If I come here and I refresh, you would see that all the p tags are colored purple, and it seems this color is not very obvious, so let me just go back to red. You can see all these p tags are red. What if I change this to div, which means it's going to select all p tags that are siblings after the div tag. So if I come here, you can see that this is the div. This p tag is not a sibling of this div, but these other p tags are siblings. So if I come here and I refresh, you can see this one doesn't have that styling again, but these two have those styles. Another thing to note is that because in the CSS we do div the tilde symbol before the p tag, that means the p tag has to be a sibling that comes after the div tag. If it comes before, this is not going to work. So if I come here and I move these p tags from down here to come before the div, if I come here and I refresh, you can see that they are not styled. That's because the p tag, as we have declared here, should be a sibling that comes after the div tag. So if I take this back to their position, which is after the div tag, or let's even say I take one of these to the top here, if I refresh, you can see only the last one is red because that is the only one that comes after the div tag. And the last combinator I'll be showing you in this video is the adjacent combinator. This allows you to style an element that is a sibling immediately after another element. Now with the sibling combinator, like I mentioned, it's going to match all the p tags that are siblings after this div. So when we had this other p tag down here, we can see that both of them were red. But what if we only want to style this p tag that is immediately after this div? Then we're going to use the plus symbol. What the plus symbol does is it's called an adjacent combinator. It allows you to select the direct sibling that is just after another element. So this means it's going to select the p tag that is directly after this div tag. If I come here and I refresh, you can see that after this div here, this is the p tag that follows, and that is why it is red. If I come here and I take both p tags to the top, it's not going to work because even though the p tags are actually siblings of this div tag, but then it is not after the div tag. Because of the way we declared it here, the p tag has to be a sibling that comes immediately after the div tag. So if I come here and I bring this p tag down again and I refresh, you can see that the styles are now applied. Like I said, you can use different selectors. So if on this div tag I have a hover before I use the adjacent combinator to select this p, if I come here and refresh, you can see nothing is red, but when I hover on this div, then you can now see that the p tag is styled. Now I'm not hovering on the div. If I go back to the div, you can see the styles are actually applied. These are the combinator selectors that allows you to combine multiple selectors to select elements. I also have a CSS simplified playlist where I simplify different topics or concepts in CSS. You should see the playlist somewhere on the screen right now. You can click it if you want to check out other CSS videos that I've made and even the ones that I will make in the future. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe, and also turn on notifications so that you are notified when next I make a simplified CSS video.